Well, one of my biggest takeaways from this course was learning how to look at experiences deeper, where I felt like people were being racist or discriminating because of my identity. In the beginning, when we were asked to think about times when we were treated differently, that question was not hard for me to answer because I've experienced discrimination throughout different parts of my life. So examples came to my mind without much thought. What took more thought was slowing down and trying to explain why it happened in the first place. Because these were real things I had lived through, my emotions would come up first. That was one of the biggest shifts for me. I started realizing that people's assumptions usually don't come out of the blue. They come from somewhere. And I just think a lot of people growing up hearing the same stereotypes, and I'm also guilty of this because just like everybody else, the way I view people was learned through family, friends, social media, and other forms of the way we communicate. And after generations of this happening, it becomes normal to the point you don't think about it or recognize it. So then so then when I think about a situation where someone judged me, I'm less emotional and I try to rationalize why it's happening and think more about the bigger picture behind it. Those kinds of situations, I really connected to power, privilege, and oppression because it shows, depending on your identity, how hard or easy it will be for you to move through the world. How some people don't have to deal with being like questioned as much, while others are constantly dealing with stereotypes or assumptions placed on them. Those kind of thoughts are not accidental, and it comes from the old ideas that keep getting passed down and treated like they're normal. The examples about school breaks being built around Christian holidays also stood out to me because I never realized that before, and that made me realize how privilege can become so normal that people don't always notice it. That example helped me see that privilege is not always, something. It's not always about someone trying to have power over others. Sometimes it's just built into the way that things are, or the way things are set up, and people only notice, they only notice it when they are not the group that's benefiting from it. It was also helpful for me to see the four eyes broken down, where I could understand, how they affect me and other people and society as a whole. I thought about discrimination before, but I had not always thought about how deeply it can affect somebody internally. Sometimes the outside judgment starts to change the way you see yourself. Even when those assumptions are not true, being able to name that made me understand my own feelings better. It also reminded me that part of growth is not only seeing what happened, but also change the way I talk to myself and the way I see myself, and those after those experiences. So one course material that stayed with me was the danger of a single story. I Because I connected it to Native people. I know how it feels when people only see one version of us. Sometimes it feels like people only learn about Native people through like old pictures or history books, and then they think that is enough to understand who we are. That stood out to me because Native people are not all the same. We come from different tribes and families and experiences. It made me think about how frustrating it is when people don't see the full person in front of them. It also made me check myself. I know I don't like being judged before people know me, but I also have to think about the times that I might have judged others, too quickly. That was an important part of my learning, because growth is not only about what other people need to change, it's also about what I notice in myself. So, how my assignments supported my learning. I think the dialogue partner assignment was one of the assignments that stayed with me the most because it was a real conversation instead of just another school task. My partner and I had different backgrounds, but one thing we connected on was that we were both first generation college students. Um, the conversation I remember the most because neither of us really could go to our parents for advice on how to navigate college. It was not because they didn't care. It was because they had not had gone through that experience themselves. So there were certain things that they couldn't explain to us. We both had to learn how to figure out things on our own, like how to enroll, our financial aid. That made college, harder, but it also made us more independent. We learned how to problem solve, advocate for ourselves, and ask questions when we needed help. Having that conversation showed me how people can have different cultures, genders, and life experiences, but still connect through a shared struggle. It also showed me how identity is not just about race or gender by itself. Being first generation shaped how both of us experience college. That was something I also connected to intersectionality, because being first generation was only part of who we were. That made me realize that two people can share one struggle but still experience college in different ways, because of the other parts of their identity. It also made me think about how someone can have privilege in one area but still be judged or discriminated against in another. So, my growth plans and next steps, one area I want to grow on is how I handle moments where I feel like someone is judging me by how I look. I'm confident in who I am, but that doesn't mean that those moments are not frustrating. It can still bother me when someone acts like they already know me before they actually do. I want to get better at pausing and not letting that moment take over my thoughts. Sometimes people judge from just like stereotypes, what they were taught or what they think they know about people who look like me. That doesn't make it right, but it reminds me that their judgment is not really about who I am. For me, growth means knowing I can feel bothered by something without letting it change how I see myself. I know who I am, and I just want to keep reminding myself in those moments. You know, to end, this course made me look at identity in a way I cannot really unsee now. It helped me understand that people carry more than what others notice first, and those parts of who we are can affect how we are treated. This class also reminded me that I don't want to move through life assuming I already know someone's story. I want to keep practicing that by slowing down, listening more, and checking myself when I notice my own assumptions. Overall, I'm leaving this course with more of an awareness of myself and more responsibility for how I choose to understand other people.